For the past little while on this channel, I've been exploring what makes a video game important. Just as other artistic mediums have immensely popular and influential works, I wanted to try and determine which games fit these and other criteria. Of course, there is a big problem in defining what constitutes importance. Is it just the impact that a game has on culture? Is it sales? Is it how a particular game's design influences other games? Do the stories in these games explore deep philosophical and socio-political themes? Normally, I would do a video offering up just my opinion on this matter, but due to the colossal subjectivity of this topic, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to reach out to a couple of other video game experts to tackle this question with me. In this video, I partnered with Mike and Casen from the YouTube channel Resonant Arc. They do a lot of excellent, long-form video game analysis that I've been watching for years. And we've also done some collaborative analysis in the past on games like Planescape Torment and Metal Gear Solid 2. Naturally, I felt that they would offer up some interesting, unique perspectives on this subject. So the three of us each put together top 10 lists of what we believe are the most important video games ever made. And while we had a solid degree of commonality in our lists, there was also a surprising level of diversity. Mike and Casen picked some games that I would have never even considered, but upon reflection, really helped broaden the discussion in very interesting ways. We had an absolute blast recording this, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Anyway, on with the discussion. Wait, what? What do you mean Cloud should have ended up with Barrett? Mike, that makes absolutely... Oh, sorry, we're live. Hi guys. Welcome to the video. Look who it is. It's Mike and Casen from Resonant Arc. How's it going, guys?
Oh, it's going great.
Yeah. How you doing,
Mike?
Mike?
Really well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm very excited that we finally got to do this. I'm pretty sure that everybody a lot of the people that are watching this probably know who you guys are, but just in case, do you want to tell everybody what Resonant Arc is, what you guys do over there, what you've been up to lately?
Sure thing. Go for it, Casen. You got this.
All right. So we just talk about dope games, and we talk about them in a dope way, and we talk about games that are meaningful and impactful, the most influential games. We often have a focus on RPGs and classic games, older games from the 90s, and games that really hit you in the feels and mean something. And we try to kind of break down the writing techniques and the music and the way that everything kind of works together to produce that feeling, that valuable feeling that we as gamers feel like is something that you only get from experiencing good art. And so we talk about that basically every week. Usually twice a week. And there we go.
Yeah, you guys have been killing it lately, and hence why I implied that there's crossover between our audiences. Yeah, we've done, I've come over to your guys' channel and done a bunch of stuff with you. We did Planescape Torment, the series on that. That was a lot of fun. We most recently did the Metal Gear Solid 2 stuff. And it's been a blast. And for a while we wanted to do something over on my main channel, and sort of struggled to come up with an idea. But I came up with the idea of doing top 10 most important games when I was watching you guys do your top 10 most underrated games and your top 10 favorite games. And it's like, well, these guys are pretty knowledgeable about the video game medium. Let's what if we tried to determine or just speculate on what are the most impactful games? What games had the most impact on the gaming medium in terms of it as an art form, in terms of it as a business, on culture, all that. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to, well, you sort of hinted at this beforehand, Casen, but I want to hear from Mike as well. How was it putting together your list? Did you have a difficult time, and what criteria did you consider?
Oh, it's to this moment, I feel like my list is terrible.
Me too.
Because this is a very easy thing to overthink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At first, I wanted to look more at like a broader view of influence and cultural impact. So if you start there, you could almost exclusively fill a list of 10 with arcade titles before the age of consoles.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you want to go with Space Invaders and Missile Command and Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. And, even before that, you have
Pong.
One of the there's Pong, but there's also one of the very first video games ever made. I was looking into this. This was fascinating.
Me too.
A game called, from 1961, Space War. had never heard of this until I started kind of doing a little bit of research for this video we were going to make together. And so, Tetris and a bunch of others. And so I can't just stay in that space. That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So I start thinking about moving more into the console ages, the games we actually grew up playing. And if I wanted to put something like Final Fantasy on there, well, that's directly inspired by Wizardry. So is Wizardry actually the one that's more influential? Right. You know what I'm saying? There are arguments to be made for so many that it's totally overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you think you're getting it wrong almost no matter what you pick.
Right. Yeah.
So the third thing I thought about, which eventually put a list on paper for me to do this video with, was on top of those two things, it's also has to have a personal impact on me. So I kind of brought that personal part of it into it, a game that I've actually played, I can actually speak passionately on. And so that's what's going to end up filling out the list. But just know that I have thought of putting all the games you probably thought of out there in the audience.
Right.
But it has to have also been something that I played myself and that moved me and that inspired me. And so that's what ended up getting me something concrete.
Fair enough. It's sort of inescapable. Like there are going to be a couple on my list too that you could probably come across as biased towards me, for lack of a better word. But that's why I brought you guys on, because it's such a broad topic as it is. But if the more people that we have, and it comes across as a little bit more fair. Casen, what about you?
Right.
Are you about the same?
About the same. I had a hard time as well, and ultimately I decided on the exact same thing Mike did. We did not talk about this ahead of time. I was like, well, one of the games on my list, for example, is the oldest video game that exists that I have actually played. Okay. And I didn't want to go for, because it goes back into the 50s. Like, this goes way back. And I haven't played those games. I don't know what they're like. I can guess their impact just because they were games early on, so those must have been pioneers, but I don't know enough about them to really comment on them, and what about them really influenced the game industry. I don't know any of that stuff, but I do know the ones that I have played. And so I ultimately rounded out my list based on exclusively games that I've actually played before, with the half exception of one, but we'll get to that. It's a fun one.
And I already put forward my criteria as for what's going to be on my list at the beginning. But it's sort of, as I just said, it's a mixture of what impact did it have on global culture, how did it advance gaming as a business medium, as an artistic medium, and also just the actual content of the game itself in terms of story and game design, all those different factors. Okay. And everything that we said here is valid. I'm very excited to see some of the diversity here. So let's get into the actual list. Just one last thing before we get started, just to sort of explain to people beforehand how we're going to go through this, just to keep things as cohesive and keep a pretty decent pace going, hopefully. What we're going to do is I'm going to read off my 10 through 7, and then Mike or Casen will read off their 10 through 7, and then we'll go through 6 through 2, 6 through 2, 6 through 2, and then trade one apiece. If I have a game that's on the 10 through 7 on my list, that's on Mike or Casen's 6 through 2, we'll just kick the discussion until we get to their list. Did I say that right? Did that make sense? So
I think so. Yes.
If I
makes sense to me.
Yeah. So for example, if I have I don't know, Mary Kate and Ashley Sweet 16 at number 10 and Casen has it at number 2, then I'll say it and then he'll say kick and then we'll have the discussion. Okay, we got it. So these are the top 10 most important games. I'll start with my number 10 and one of you get ready to say kick. All right. My number 10 is Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, kick on that.
Okay. All right.
Hard kick.
I was ready for that. My number 9 then. Now, if anybody had any doubt about how objective I'm trying to be with my list, to whatever degree you can be objective about something like this, this should hopefully dispel any doubt. My number 9 is Metal Gear Solid for the PS1.
It's not on my list.
Okay.
I'm not kicking that one, unfortunately. That's one that I again thought about putting on there, but did not.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Kick means you did put it on, right?
Yeah, so I did not put it on there, so I'm not kicking
Yeah,
it.
me neither, but I was close. I thought about this. I thought about it.
Yeah, it just barely made mine too. It's yeah, as you can see, guys, it was tough, but it just barely managed to get on there. So there are two secondary reasons why I put it on the list, and one primary reason.
Okay.
Starting with the secondary, obviously, it's very much associated with popularizing the stealth genre. Now, obviously, there were stealth games before that. Probably the most notable one is Thief: The Dark Project, but it was sort of Metal Gear Solid that took that genre and sort of propelled it forward and made it not be so niche anymore. The second secondary element is that what's the most iconic moment from that game? It's the whole Psycho Mantis reading your memory card thing. And just that whole experience, I think it opened up a lot of people's eyes to what the video game medium was capable of and what made it unique as a form of artistic expression. Just having that level of uncomfortability that a lot of people had. And I remember myself having when I first played that moment and I didn't know what the heck was going on. I mean, like 30 seconds later, I realized it was my memory card, but just that level of unsettling, there was just nothing like it at the time. But obviously the most important reason why I put it here is because up until like very recently, what was the highest form of praise that you could give a video game? It was, oh, it's like I'm playing a movie. Right?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And, you know, it's not like there weren't games prior to Metal Gear Solid that we said that about, you know, Final Fantasy VII being one of them. That was like the cinematic presentation of that game was partially why it sold so well.
That's true, but Final Fantasy VII didn't ever quite feel like you were playing a movie. Like the cutscenes kicked in, but the abstraction of the turn-based RPG system kind of, you know, precluded that from being considered like a cinematic experience necessarily. Whereas Metal Gear Solid, it's all action. It feels more like you really are playing a movie.
Exactly. It's where those two worlds really seem to have finally merged. Full voice acting, not FMVs, but like actual directed cutscenes within the engine. And just on top of that, it was a great game to play with great characters and intriguing plot. And you could say that there were games after Metal Gear Solid 1 that were better. I would certainly hold that opinion. But in terms of importance, I don't think there's any game in the series that is more distinguished, let's say. All right.
I would agree, especially in that specific space. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid it just stands out. It stands out just brilliantly.
Yeah, I would say this right alongside Vagrant Story, though.
That's right.
Vagrant Story is not nearly as popular or have the cultural impact or anything like that. So Vagrant Story wouldn't make this list for me. But what those two games did at around the same time is introduce cinematics that felt about on the same level as what you would see like in a Hollywood movie. Of course, the graphics were PS1 graphics, but like I'm talking about camera work and the techniques of filmmaking being introduced into game cutscenes. It was pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, and the voice acting, you can't gloss over how important that was at the time.
Yeah,
it's so well done. All right, number 8, and I want to give special thanks in advance to a friend of mine, Subsidian, for helping me with this entry. My number 8 is World of Warcraft.
Oh man, dude, I had it on my top 10 and I tossed it out at the last minute. I tossed it out.
I'm so curious to see what you guys have on your list. This is going to be so fun. All right, so number 8, it's, you know, the most obvious reason is that it's the most popular MMO ever of the last 20 years. And it's a game that everybody knows. It's right up there, well, not on the same level, but approaching like Mario and Pokemon and Zelda and that sort of stuff. But putting that aside, it's a game that is responsible for advancing the medium technically, and it's had a disproportionate impact on gaming culture. It's sort of easier to explain by just sort of going down the list here. So, first of all, when it came to having multiple players in a single zone and trying to see how far you could push that technology, World of Warcraft was really sort of on the forefront of doing that, especially around the Wrath of the Lich King period. That's when I think that's the second DLC that came out for that. Okay. And you know, games sort of adopting that technology after that is very fundamental. It's the birthplace of some of the most pro players and the top streamers that are on the internet right now, with the possible, maybe the exception of League of Legends.
Of course.
Yeah, but World of Warcraft is definitely up there. Yeah. And also, probably the number one place, like the number one game where people, men and women, or whatever your persuasion is, met up online, and then they met in real life.
That's true. That's totally true.
Yeah, like I've known so many.
Yeah.
I feel like it's such a big game that everybody knows like one
Oh yeah.
couple that met in that game and then met in real life. That's just how much of a phenomenon that game was. And then of course it was
That's
parodied on
wild.
South Park. Yeah.
That's totally true. That's totally true.
Yeah. Did you guys ever play World of Warcraft, either of you?
No,
like
which is why I
I've
don't
seen it.
have it.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of RuneScape, and
Yeah,
actually,
RuneScape,
originally, when I was kind of first putting this list together, I had EverQuest on there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not because I had played it, because I wasn't considering that at that time, but because it was the first MMO of this sort of
Like the
type we're
big
talking
one.
about, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And sort of its influence and the way it sort of launched that entire genre that's obviously huge today. But I actually have never personally played World of Warcraft. I think the only MMOs that I've played are the Lord of the Rings Online, RuneScape, Final Fantasy 11, and Final Fantasy 14. I'm not a big MMO guy, so that's the reason.
Yeah. Neither am I. The only MMO I've ever played was World of Warcraft, and I had to force myself to stop twice because it nearly consumed my life. And it's just because it's so much fun. There's so much content.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, did I interrupt one of you?
I was gonna say something along the lines of Dark Age of Camelot, and there was a whole bunch of MMOs that came out around this time. I think a Lord of the Rings Online started to get developed because World of Warcraft was so huge and was making so much money. There are still, I know people to this day who still are playing this game hours and hours a day, right?
Yeah.
That's 20 some years later. That is wild. I don't know how many games. There are games that people still play today that are decades old, but not to this extent, not this many hours, and not somebody that close to me that I just know personally. It's just like, wow, you're still playing that game. That's wild.
Yeah.
I don't think any other game can quite claim that.
Yeah, no, like people call like live service games nowadays a second job. World of Warcraft is the pinnacle of that.
Yes,
'Cause
exactly.
It's just it consumes your life, and you want it to because it's just so much fun. Yeah. So that was my number 8, and then finally my number 7. My guess is that Mike is going to pick on this one. My number 7 is Dark Souls.
Yeah, I'll kick that one.
All right, cool. So that's my 10 through 7. Which of you want to go first?
Let's have Mike go.
Okay.
Okay. So, like I said, I think my list kind of sucks, to be honest.
No,
but
come on.
I had to, in the end, really tie this to stuff that I've played in order to have anything meaningful to say about it. And so I will rearrange the order on this a little bit to make it a little less boring. But I am going to do 2 Zelda games in a row.
Okay.
Oh,
So the original Legend of Zelda is my number 10.
Nice.
very nice.
And if there's no kick on that,
I had it on my list until 10 minutes ago, and I had
Yeah.
to drop it.
Good choice.
I get a lot of flack for this. There's actually one particular member of our Discord community, our Patreon community, who is the complete opposite of me on this. I am not the biggest 2D Zelda guy. I don't know why. I have never understood why 2D Zelda didn't, sort of work for me the way 3D Zelda did. So, when it comes to games like A Link to the Past, which are the most famous 2D Zelda games, those are not some of my favorite. But the original Legend of Zelda is one that I think has to be mentioned. It's one that, despite its age, is still really fun to play. And I think one of the things that I love the most about it was there were really hardcore, even you go back to like text-based adventure games, there are a lot of really hardcore dungeon crawlers that preceded this.
Yeah.
But I think what Zelda did was it took the dungeon crawling genre or that aspect of certain games and made it palatable for a wider market for sort of the average player by introducing these puzzles into it that were really fun, got you to think a little bit, but weren't so obtuse that you can't figure it out or you're sitting there stuck for hours.
Right.
It found like the exact balance, I think, for getting people to think and utilize a set of tools, but not being so cryptic and so difficult that you can't beat the game. And that was a very common thing in the NES and previous to that with arcades and things like that.
Games were hard
So-
back in the day, man.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
extremely difficult and on purpose.
Almost on purpose. Exactly on purpose.
Yeah, especially you go back to the arcade days. Some of the games, people would get so good at them that there were companies that would come out and they would make modifications for existing games on purpose to make them more difficult so that arcades could make more money.
Yep.
Specifically so that people would be spending more money instead of playing. I read a story about a guy who played 31 hours straight on one quarter.
On one quarter.
On, I think, Asteroid or something like that, right?
Wow.
So it created a problem, and so they were made very difficult on purpose in order for arcades to make more money. But Zelda, sort of began the tradition. I don't want to say began, but it was in the beginnings of the tradition of the home console where, it's a different business model. And you want these kids to actually be able to beat the game. And so, of course, NES games are very hard. But after that, I think game developers and game designers started to think about balancing them in a way that would make them challenging but fun and not impossible. And The Legend of Zelda very much fits that mold. And it set the stage for adventure games and has been the leader in that space ever since.
Yeah.
If you're a big fan of The Binding of Isaac, you have The Legend of Zelda to thank for that. So that's my number 10.
What about things like I feel like that was somewhere along the lines of the first open world type game as well, where you can really just go anywhere.
The way that we talk about open world today, I did at one time also have Grand Theft Auto 3 on this list. Because that was the first one of like a totally seamless, like it's not screens or, it sort of changes or it loads a new area. It was a seamless sort of open city. But I didn't play Grand Theft Auto 3, and I'm not the biggest fan of that series. But there are a lot of open world games I've loved a lot, and that was a huge influence on them. But yeah, I mean, Zelda was very open in the sense that you could do dungeons in whatever order you wanted to. You didn't have to do it in any kind of linear fashion, and that was a really cool aspect of it as well. There's a lot of secrets. So, great game. Yeah. I will go right after that to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So
that's a kick.
Kicked.
Yeah, kicked for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, sweet. At number, and I'm doing the boring, like just Nintendo titles here at the beginning. But number 8, I'm going to go with Super Mario Brothers 64. Sorry, it's not Brothers, just Super Mario 64.
Okay.
Is that a kick for me? Hold on.
Did you put that one later?
Mine, it is exactly number 8 for mine as well.
Okay, we're on the same level.
Yeah, we're right here. We're right here.
This one was mostly for transitioning games into 3D.
Yes, exactly.
So the how it played so seamlessly and how fun it was and how easy it was to navigate in 3D with this camera that a lot of developers were struggling to figure out what to do with that or how to control that or how do we allow the player to have control of this camera in a way to where it doesn't seem clunky and clumsy and they can see where they're trying to go. This was a difficult thing that developers were trying to figure out there in the early days of 3D games on, PlayStation 1, of course on computer games as well, but then the N64 comes out in 96, and both Ocarina of Time, which we just skipped and we'll talk about in a minute, but Mario 64 were definitely pioneers for that and set the stage for how players were going to be able to look around and see and control their camera and be able to play the game seamlessly without having to fight that in 3D.
Yeah.
On top of that, I just love the music. I think it's probably my favorite Super Mario soundtrack. The paintings and jumping into the paintings, go to the different worlds. It was just, I can't, it's one of those games you can't really explain unless you were there. You try to explain this to a teenager today, and I don't think you can really get it. Coming from 2D side-scrolling being sort of the primary way you played platformers before this into 3D platformers, and it opened up the whole genre in a way that was mind-blowing. So that's my number 8.
You didn't mention how you could like grab Mario's face and like open his mouth and like stretch his nose and pull up his hat. That was very appealing to me, for me as a kid. The fact that you could just do that. Like the 3D was such a new experience at the time. It was anything that lets you do something unique or different with the 3D was so cool. I also was very confused at why the doorknobs were square. I just didn't get it. I was like, why can't you make it a circle? It didn't make sense to me. But that game.
Same with hands that were like just big squares.
A bunch
the
of
fingers are
squares
stuck together. Yeah.
yeah. And my brother, who was like, a nerd about all this stuff, he was just like, oh, it's because they can't render the proper number of polygons. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, okay. Like, I had no idea how any of this stuff worked. It just was magic. It was just pure magic to me. And the thing is, though, even games nowadays, you think of something like Nier Automata or a lot of games that will include platforming. I'm not saying there aren't 3D platformers. There are. But 2D platforming has really, even a 3D game will switch to a 2D kind of mode when it comes time to do certain platforming sections of the game, like I mentioned with Nier Automata. It's crazy that on the very first attempt to make a very difficult to transition into 3D style of game, like a platformer, that they knocked it out of the park on their first try. Now, if they didn't knock it out of the park, they wouldn't have released the game, but still they did, and there it is, right? This game, it's incredible that they were actually really able to pull this off, especially since the PS1 had been kind of experimenting with 3D for a little while before the N64 came out. This was Nintendo's first jump into it. Yeah. And Nintendo doesn't always nail their first jump into things, but they did this time. However, Mike, the music, the best Mario game music is actually Mario RPG, so I'd love to correct you on that one.
I actually thought you were going to say Yoshi's Island.
Oh, okay, you're right. Actually, Yoshi's Island is also better than, but also the intro animation for Yoshi's Island has that kind of 3D feel too, but on the Super NES. So that was super fun for me as well.
Now the real answer is Yoshi's Woolly World, guys. I mean, come on.
That's a good one too. I actually have played that.
I like that game. It's a well-made game.
Yeah. All right, and then your number 7, Mike.
Number 7 for me is Street Fighter 2.
That's a good choice.
I think cultural impact and influence are pretty obvious. I think the modern fighting game is basically has this game to thank for many of its mechanics, including combos and special abilities and things like that.
It was so
the jump.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I shouldn't have interrupted. Go ahead.
The jump between Street Fighter 1 to Street Fighter 2 is so immense. If you have never tried playing Street Fighter 1 before, go back and try playing Street Fighter.
I don't think I have.
Kind of terrible. And so you come into Street Fighter 2 and it feels like that's what fighting games were always meant to be. And everything that has come after that has taken influence from it and has taken its framework. On top of that, the music, which was done by Yoko Shimomura, this surprised me when I learned it. It surprised a lot of people. She's known for Kingdom Hearts and other RPGs working at, Squaresoft and Square Enix. But she did the music in this game, and I think that's almost the best part of the game.
Right.
I would go
very
to
energizing.
I would go to my cousin's house to play this because we didn't have a Super Nintendo at our house, and they did. And we would go there, a couple times a month, maybe on weekends, and we'd spend the night. And this was always one of maybe 3, including Donkey Kong Country and Earthworm Jim, that we would play all night long. And the characters were just the characters were just so expressive and cool. All the different stages flying around the world. So we played the the World Warrior version.
Yeah.
And so you're going to Brazil and Japan and China and Russia and USA and all places over the world. And it was just a blast. So that's my number 7.
Yeah. A game's mechanics are so good when they make so many different versions of that game. Yes. It's just like there's Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior, then there's Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah, Turbo.
And then just regular Turbo. And it just took them forever to get to Street Fighter 3, but it's just because it was so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course there's arcade versions and there's still a really robust competitive scene for this game today, which is
that's true.
Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy. When the mechanics are that good, it's like Super Smash Brothers Melee.
Right. It's like you don't, anytime you iterate on it, it kind of just makes it a little worse.
Right. Exactly. You don't want to over-iterate. All right. That was a great 10 through 7, Mike. I don't know what you're talking about. All right. Casen, you're 10 through 7, sir.
All right, so my number 10 is a game I have barely played, but have played, and just cannot discount the creativity of this game. It is Minecraft. It is very difficult to overstate what the cultural impact of Minecraft. on video games just in general. This is the most recent game that I have on my list, and it is number 10, and I had Street Fighter 2 on as well. Mm-hmm. And I had to leave it off, but I could not take off Minecraft.
It barely just missed the list. That and Super Mario 64 for me.
Oh, it's just wild, especially we're in the midst of the release of the Minecraft movie now, which is going to make $10 billion to whoever made it. And the cultural impact of Minecraft is huge. And the reason why I was okay with leaving it on this list, because it doesn't really appeal to my general gaming tastes, is because of the amount of stuff you can do in it. There are people who have made all of Middle-earth in Minecraft. There's a server that literally they created Rivendell, like the whole thing. Lothlorien, like you can traverse the entire place. It'll take you days. But yes, it is wild. It is so cool and other people have been able to do this, but what I love about Minecraft, and you would never have guessed that a modern game took the chance to do this unless it was just a limitation they had, but it's like, they're called voxels, right? The blocky, but it's basically pixel art. It's pixel stuff from the 90s, and that's how they designed the characters and the game. Like, it's got this feeling of pixel art while maintaining this 3D kind of look to it as well. That I just think is awesome. It has kept pixel art alive in the modern consciousness of even the younger generation now, that they think that looks cool. Like, you look at the TNT, and it's just a bunch of, like, pixels with the letters TNT on it. And it's like, kids still identify with the pixel art, which is the proper mode of being, in my opinion. Pixel art is great. I was afraid that it was a goner as games only got higher and higher fidelity. But Minecraft has preserved that aesthetic as well as created a sandbox game with almost unlimited possibilities. It's the simplicity of the game is what I love so much about it.
Well, fun fact.
I think the one and only time that I don't want to say one and only, there's one and only period of time, which was about 2 weeks, where I actually played Minecraft myself.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see how quickly you could get enveloped into it and kind of addicted to it. On top of all the things you said, I think the most impressive thing I had seen other people do was build the Starship Enterprise from the TNG series, 1-to-1 in all of the freaking rooms and the holodeck and the bridge and everything 1-to-1. So obviously that level of dedication, creativity to a game like that is there's obviously something special there when people are doing those kinds of really impressive things. But all I did was build like a castle. I built a castle. I spent 2 or 3 days working on it, and it was a lot of work. And I finished my castle, and I was standing outside it, admiring it. And then I said, I just spent something like 16 to 20 hours building a castle that no one on earth except me cares about. I'm never playing this game again. I can't do this because it will never be as impressive as what other people do, and it takes so much time. But it was a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy to get roped into it. So
nice. Yeah, fun fact about me, Minecraft is one of my top 10 favorite games. And I actually once tried to rebuild 1-to-1 all of the Forbidden Lands from Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, wow.
And I got about halfway done and it never got finished.
How long did that take?
I want to say 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's how much I love that game, man. That game's my lifeblood. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Could you create the Colossi as well?
No.
Or
no, I wasn't that good. No, it's the only limit with that game is your imagination, and as long as your imagination's active, you could play that game forever. And I actually had to stop playing it, kind of like with World of Warcraft, just because I couldn't. It just took up so much of my life, and I had other stuff that I had to do. But yeah, it's
like what? Game. Come on.
Well, play other games.
Play other games.
Play other
for
games.
My career. All right,
that's an acceptable answer.
Right. What's your number 9?
All right, so my number 9 is a little game called Doom.
That's a kick.
So, is that a kick? Okay.
You mean 1993 Doom, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
The
good.
OG Doom. Okay, so then my number 8, we've got Super Mario 64, which we've already talked about. Wonderful, brilliant game. Number 7 is Super Mario for the NES.
That's a kick.
Kick.
Oh, come on, guys. All right, we'll talk later.
All right, cool. Yeah, this is good. All right, so back to me. My number 6. I'm really curious to hear your reactions to this one. My number 6 is Eco.
I love this game. I love it a lot. I
Me
don't
too.
have it on here, so I can't kick it, but it's
Nor I.
phenomenal.
Yeah. So the reason why I put it on there is just when I did research, when I first came across this game, and I researched just how many games and game designers were inspired by this game specifically, I was shocked. And it really just comes down to the design ethos for this game. It was sort of innovative at the time. So, when you play a game, you theoretically want to try and do as much as you can to provide the consumer with as much fun as you can. But Eco comes along, Fumito Ueda, the director of Eco, comes along with his ethos, which is game design by subtraction. And what he does is he takes out anything from a game that isn't absolutely necessary. And the stuff that's left there, the gamer is meant to impart as much meaning and engagement as they will allow themselves to do. And with Eco, what's great about that, primarily for 2 reasons. One is that you're going through a castle and you're trying to escape it while escorting a young girl named Yorda. And because there's such a lack of things going on, you sort of unconsciously build up a deep attachment with Yorda and all the stuff that you go through. But also, if there happens to be something novel in the castle that sort of stands out amongst everything else, it seems kind of, for lack of a better word, bland, even though it's not bland, it's very interesting. You can't help but speculate about what the heck is going on in this world. Shadow of the Colossus carried on that tradition very well, same with The Last Guardian, but it all started with Eco. Now, as for what games Eco inspired, I'll just go down the list. One of them is Journey, one of the greatest games ever made. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, which is in my top 5 favorite games of all time, inspired the relationship between the prince and Farah. Halo 4, I love Halo 4. I know a lot of people don't, but I love it. Inspired the relationship between Master Chief and Cortana. All the Hazelight games, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, A Way Out, It Takes Two, most recently Split Fiction. None of those games would exist without Eco, according to the game's director. But of course, the most prominent example is Hidetaka Miyazaki with the Dark Souls series, which we'll talk about relatively soon. He said that he would not be a game designer without Eco. And you can see why. And we'll talk more about why that is when we get around to Dark Souls. But yeah, it's such a special game. It still holds up. I highly recommend people check it out if they haven't. Yeah. Any thoughts, guys?
This is a great pick because there's a whole separate aspect to this rich tapestry of most important games that I hadn't really even considered, but that I think is really important to bring up. Sometimes there are artists who are classified as artists for other artists rather than artists for, for the kind of the mass appeal or for consumers. You'll have some rappers that they're not like the most famous, but they are huge inspirations for other rappers. Other musicians, other filmmakers, there's definitely filmmakers like that where their films are made for other filmmakers, not necessarily for tons of people to go out to the theater and see the movie or buy the movie on, Blu-ray or DVD or VHS or whatever. And that's kind of what this game is. It's a game that has gone so far in inspiring other game designers, but was not necessarily a huge hit. Not that it was a flop or anything, but it wasn't a massive success. Certainly not in the way that something like Shadow of the Colossus was after it. But it is still a game that has the ability to impact people at that level, particularly those who think about games as art, who think about games on a game design level. It is incredibly well made, incredibly well optimized, and deeply philosophical in a lot of ways, that when you're thinking on games on kind of that other level, which is what a lot of game designers will do, it's going to inspire you a lot. So I think it's a fantastic pick.
Thank you, sir. All right.
I agree as well.
So my number 5, this was the one that I had the hardest time placing. I even up until like when we were recording, I was contemplating whether or not it should be on there. Like I was this close to replacing it, but like, yeah. So this one might seem like the one that's the most out of place, but I think people can understand why it's there. My number 5 is Grand Theft Auto 3, as
Okay.
Mike referred to before. It's just for the simple reason that every open world game, you can trace the way that it's constructed back to this game. It's not the first open world game, obviously. Like there were games like, we mentioned before, Legend of Zelda.
Right.
Leading up to it, maybe you could say Shenmue. That was pretty huge at the time. But it was just the predicate and the formula that Grand Theft Auto 3 put forward with its open world design, that it just seemed like, wow, video games can be like this. And then a whole bunch of other games just tried to, I'm sorry about the sirens, guys, just tried to adopt it and, change enough of it so that, they're not being plagiarist, but you know what I mean. So like games like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Mafia, Saints Row, Just Cause, even the Bethesda games, you could see like why those games would be very different if it weren't for Grand Theft Auto 3. And then it's just,
You're right.
Grand Theft Auto 3 at the time, just having a big open city that you can explore and do whatever the hell you want in a non-linear way. Games up until that point have been pretty linear. Felt just so freeing. And also, just one final thing, obviously, Grand Theft Auto 3 has been a series that, Grand Theft Auto, sorry, just as a series has been rife with controversy. And a lot of that sort of just started with this game. And like, should video games be able to let you go around causing chaos and attacking pedestrians and stuff like that? That impact on the culture. So yeah, I put it at 5. Might be a little bit lower, but hopefully my rationale makes sense to some degree.
No, I think that's a whole other aspect that I had considered a little bit when I was trying to craft this list was a video game's importance. We sort of immediately go to, okay, how much did it inspire either the audience who played it or the game developers who would come after them? How did it influence its genre? How did it change the way games are played? How did it rank in terms of like Metacritic score or something like that? How well received was it? These are the things we immediately jump to. We almost make it like a list of best games instead of a list of important games. There is totally room here to argue that E.T. is one of the most important video games of all time.
Actually,
you know what I'm saying?
That's a fair point. Yes, absolutely.
Right, because
it impacted everything.
It wasn't the first game of its kind, being this really trashy, rushed product that, parents go out and buy, and it's just broken, terrible mess. It wasn't the first. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back of the industry. It basically is blamed for being the game that led to the crash of the video game industry in the early 80s. I think unfairly, because there was a lot of garbage out there. But
that's true.
It was one of the highest profile ones based on a really popular film.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it gets that kind of high profile attention because of that. But on this, side of the spectrum, we have games like Mortal Kombat and games like Grand Theft Auto 3, which were hugely controversial. Obviously, they're very good games, but it led to the creation of the ESRB system and other things like that. I'm specifically talking about Mortal Kombat more there. Mm-hmm. But arguments about whether or not games cause violence and playing them can make you a more violent person, which has led to a lot of scientific studies and a lot of attention on games that wouldn't have been there without games of this kind. And so that's another element of importance that I think, kind of weaves its way into this conversation. So I think Grand Theft Auto 3 is a really good pick for multiple reasons. But
thank you. Yeah, I want to echo that. I did consider games that were important for negative reasons, but I actively made the choice not to include that, just because that can open up a whole can of worms. But yeah, the games like that exist. Like you could say Overwatch was an important game because of loot boxes, but yeah, I didn't.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So anything? Should I move on to my number 4?
No, I just want to say that my mom did not let me play neither Mortal Kombat or Grand Theft Auto 3. Otherwise, I might have a little more to say about them.
Ah, okay. Fair enough. All right.
Although there's a game on this list that my mom didn't let me play. I still got it on my list.
Nice. Mom, hopefully you're not listening.
Well, there's
All
a
right.
reason. There's a reason.
Okay.
We'll get to it.
So my number 4, I don't want to call Casen out just in case this is his number 1. My number 4 is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Are we kicking that?
Yes, definite kick. Definite
Okay.
kick. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Sorry to call you out there. All right. All right. My number 3 is Super Mario Brothers, the original from 1985.
I'm going to kick that one.
Nice. Okay, cool. And then finally, my number 2 is Doom, 1993. This was originally much lower on the list, but over like the past month, I've been thinking about like what games would be on this. It just kept going higher and higher and higher. I couldn't believe the more that I studied this game, just how many things it influenced. So first off, well, just to piggyback off of what you were just mentioning before, Mike, about the ESRB and how that came about. Mortal Kombat was one of the reasons ESRB came about. And Night Trap, you could also say that as well. But Doom, primarily. And just the gratuitous violence that was sort of unique to Doom and those other games was a large part of the reason why the ESRB came about and why it's such a prominent entity in gaming to this day. Let's see, going down the list. Yeah, the 3D technology in Doom at the time and the way that it used displacement to sort of create the illusion of 3D, even though it was technically 2D, was sort of like, well, I think it was Tim Sweeney who said that he stopped programming altogether for an entire year just because he was so discouraged by how good the 3D technology was in Doom at the time. And you had stuff like indoor and outdoor locations. That was huge at the time. Backdrops, dynamic lighting, differences in elevation where you could look down at an enemy and shoot them. Stuff like that we take for granted nowadays, but Doom was the game that brought that about. And then that technology was licensed to other companies, which allowed them to produce their own iconic games. Games like Hexen, Medal of Honor, Half-Life. Thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah, if it weren't for Doom, Gabe Newell and like his influence through Half-Life and Valve and Steam, he probably wouldn't have even gotten into the games industry without Doom. Like the reason
big one.
Like his career started was because Bill Gates wanted him to port Doom into Windows 95 so people would play it there. And then he was just so inspired by that whole process and fell in love with the world of game design that he then went on to make Half-Life. And then, the rest is history. And then, just like it's the birthplace of the whole concept of deathmatch. Like you could play games with friends prior to Doom, but the whole concept of, one guy against 3 other guys and trying to get as many kills as you can and calling that deathmatch, that came from John Romero, and that's just sort of terminology that we take for granted. Again, and then just what else? Yeah, there was the birthplace of the whole concept of machinima. Being able to edit the HUD and record footage and just, speed runs and all that, and the modding community. So many different things that are fundamental to the way that we experience games, the way games are created, and the way the culture enjoys games nowadays, all trace themselves back to Doom. And
so, I love that so much because you're bringing up all the other games that basically used, for lack of a better term, the same engine as Doom, right? So this is the game that my parents wouldn't let me play, but it is still on my list because I got for free in a box of cereal a game called Chex Quest. Do you remember this game?
No, but I do remember?
You never got Chex Quest?
No, but you know what I do remember? I got Noah's Ark 3D. Remember that? Yeah. There's so many Doom clones, man, and they made a Christian version of it. It was awesome. It was just
brilliant.
For some reason,
anything.
Yeah, only sheep on Noah's Ark. You just go around shooting a slingshot at them. That's very Christian of them.
I think Angry Video Game Nerd did a Bible Games episode, didn't he? I think that was.
I don't remember.
I think it was. Yeah, Funny game.
That's hilarious. But Chex Quest is basically Doom, just Chex cereal, Chex. I like Chex when I was a kid. It was good stuff. But this game was the best part. And so we would play that game like crazy because we were like, I knew it was Doom, but not really Doom, but close enough to where it was like totally fine. You're shooting little aliens with like your Chex gun or something. It was wonderful. Absolutely great game. Classic forever. And because that game is 100% a ripoff of Doom, I got to throw the credit to Doom. But I played the heck out of Chex Quest, man.
Nice. So that's my 6 through 2. Mike, it's your turn. What's your 6 through 2?
Let's see. Number 6, I have The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Ooh, interesting.
And this, obviously, it was immensely successful. I think it sold over 30 million copies or something like that. So cultural impact, I think is obvious there. The thing about this game is that in a lot of ways, there's really only one thing that it did that I think was better than anyone else was doing. As far as it's like open world, it's not the best open world game. It's certainly not the best in terms of combat. It doesn't have like the most beautiful graphics ever or a lot of other things you could, point to. Maybe not the greatest soundtrack. I like it a lot. I really, really like it. But, there are all these ways in which there are other games that probably do those individual aspects better than it. But there's one really important one that it did better than any one before, and I think still does better than any that has come after it. Though I think games took note, particularly on this aspect. And that is its questing. I think that The Witcher 3, more so than any other game that I've played within its particular subgenre, does questing the best, because every little quest you take on is a really well-written story. Most RPGs like this, side quests were reduced to fetch questing and kill questing. Go get me 5 of this item. I need 3 berries, 3 of this animal carcass, 5 of these stones, and you just go running around with a grocery list collecting stuff for people.
Yeah. And there might be
It's
a
just
procedural,
busy.
like a randomizer so it feels like a new quest, but it's really just the same quest over and over.
That's another one. I think this is something Assassin's Creed kind of become known for, was you create 4 or 5 different types of gameplay systems, and you populate your open world with a million repeats of those 4 or 5 little things. Whether that's a trailing mission, whether that's, a bunch of different stuff. People probably know what I'm talking about.
You know what?
Fable 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what game I've been playing recently for the first time that's actually the worst at this, even though I really love the game? Xenoblade Chronicles.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Xenoblade. And I love Xenoblade a lot.
Yeah.
Xenoblade, I think, does other things really, really well, and that's one of my favorite games because of that. But no doubt, the busy work in terms of you're just following a checklist of tedious things in order to go back to the quest giver and get some experience or some reward or something like that.
Right.
And The Witcher 3 has almost none of that. Every quest tells a nice little story. And not only is that a lot of work and just something I don't think anyone had ever tried to this scale before, but it fits really well with the world of The Witcher, which is based on a series of novels where, at least for me, the biggest appeal to that entire IP is its philosophical bent. So, yes, he's a monster slayer, and there's action, and there's some sexiness to it, a little bit of, that kind of Game of Thrones type of adult content. That's, I think, really surface level in terms of what's actually appealing about The Witcher, though. What's most appealing about it is almost every story told in that universe centers on some kind of philosophical dilemma that 2 characters, or maybe more, will debate on. And it makes you really have to reconsider some of your own biases and things that you thought were right. It challenges you as the reader or as the player in this case. And all of these stories incorporate that. All these little quests have little stories, even if they're short, that have something like that to them that make it very much foundationally, it feels right for The Witcher. And for me, it ruined side questing in every other game forever. Because this is, in my opinion, the way quests should be constructed. And so that's what makes The Witcher 3 exceptional. People love to argue about little things it might not do as well as other games. But for me, it's always been those two parts, the philosophical bent and the exceptional storytelling, not just in its main quests or even like higher kind of profile side quests with characters and their arcs, but even in the little things. So that's my pick from number 7.
I love that. That is such great rationale. And, you know, like for obvious reasons, a lot of the games that we're going to have on both our lists are going to be older games that, you know, I didn't really ever consider The Witcher 3. But yeah, like I imagine 10 or 15 years from now, The Witcher 3 is still going to be held up as the paragon, like as the example of how to do side quests in games. And man, I have a hard time believing Witcher 4 is even going to be able to meet that or suppress it. Yeah, or come out. Yeah, let's worry about that first. All right, what's your number 5?
You know, I haven't played Cyberpunk yet. That's a game that's kind of on a short list of stuff I want to play soon in kind of the near future.
Yeah,
I'm sure that game is very similar, but
cool.
Haven't played it yet, so I can't speak on it.
It has great side quests, not to the degree of Witcher 3, but still really good. Yeah.
Number 5 for me is Dark Souls. Is there a kick there?
Not for me.
I think you mentioned it. Somebody mentioned it before. I think it was you.
It was
next,
me.
But maybe it was
number 7.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Nice.
So I think there's an argument for something like Elden Ring, because Elden Ring sold way, way more than any FromSoft game that came before it.
Right.
I think we're it's not been out long enough for us to see how it's going to inspire games that come after it, because games take 1 million years to make now. So even though it released in 2022, we're not going to see its influence on games until, still a couple years out from now.
Yeah.
That being said, there's an argument for that over something like Dark Souls. And there's even an argument for Demon Souls over Dark Souls, because Demon Souls was first. And I love Demon Souls. But I think there's no doubt that Dark Souls is what really was the springboard for From Software games.
Yep.
It's what really put them into, sort of like
the public consciousness,
the mass media, into the eye of your average gamer, everybody knowing that name, everybody knowing what it means, everybody knowing what kind of game it is.
And also just the Dark Souls of action games, the Dark Souls of Mary-Kate and Ashley, whatever, Sweet 16 birthday surprise. It's the Dark Souls of birthday games.
I think in my Final Fantasy Tactics video, I called it the Dark Souls of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's become ubiquitous. It's a cultural, phrase now.
It was the springboard. It was the framework and formula that set FromSoft on the path that they've been on ever since, and has created just an endless list of crappy copies. People, they have a whole genre for this, a Souls-like game.
Right.
So I think its cultural impact is obvious, but just personally for me, there were 3 really high-profile games that released right at the same time. So this one, Demon Souls was kind of popular, but it wasn't a big hit like this. So this was sort of a surprise big hit. But Skyrim came out in the same month. Oh, yeah. And so did The Legend of Zelda Skyward
Sword. Yeah.
All 3 of those games launched in the same month.
Wow.
And I was working at GameStop at the time. And so I was there for like the launches, the midnight releases. That used to be a thing. I don't know if it still is. Midnight release of all 3 of these games. And I played them all at the time. And I was expecting to like Zelda the most, because I was a big Zelda kid growing up, and I was expecting for Skyrim to be second and Dark Souls to be kind of a third. And it was not close. Dark Souls was miles better than those other 2 games. And I say that while loving unapologetically Skyrim. I know a lot of people like to bag on it now. I love the game. I think it's really fun. Yeah, I think it's a great game. I think it's great for, in a similar way, and I know this is a tangent, but in a similar way that people can point to all the things The Witcher 3 doesn't do well and miss the things that it does miles better than everyone else. I think Skyrim does exploration really, really, really well, and a lot of other things maybe not that well. But what kept me up all night playing Skyrim was just discovering cool stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And reading the books and just
that's right.
just exploring every nook and cranny of the whole game. But Dark Souls had the whole package. And it was a revelation in a lot of ways, and it was so addicting. I had played Demon Souls and had given up on it because, gosh darn it, the game was so hard. But I finally locked in and understood the game design here. Like, something clicked in my brain with this game, and I went back to Demon Souls, and it was easy, right? So I even ended up doing, I think it's still live on our YouTube channel, a whole Let's Play series. It's not really a Let's Play as much as a how-to play Dark Souls series that was meant to help beginners, because I finally understood a very, a select few defining principles that help you succeed in the game. And I was trying to explain that to people. And that was one of our most popular videos. I think still to this day are the first 2 or 3 videos in that series where people are like, oh, I get it now. I get it. Like, I can play this game. I understand. And being able to be a part of that moment where it clicks for people was a lot of fun for me. And so that game I have put probably 1,000 hours into on multiple playthroughs over the years.
Wow.
And it's one that I will return to over and over again. Even though I haven't beaten some of the other great From Software games like Elden Ring. I've played it a lot. I've played maybe 50 hours, but I haven't finished it because I'm gotten older. I have a lot more responsibility. It's harder for me to dedicate the time to get really good at games like that now.
No pun intended.
But yes, to get good. Because that's what you have to do. You have to get good in order to really get the most out of those games. And sometimes I just don't have the time and patience these days like I used to. So Dark Souls will always be the one that sort of shines there for me. So that's pick number 5.
Nice.
Very nice.
Just one last thing on Dark Souls before we move on, just bringing things back to Hidetaka Miyazaki and how he was inspired by Eco. A large part of why the Dark Souls games and all the other From Software games are so popular, aside from just the amazing combat, which nothing feels as good after you play those games, in my opinion. But it's also just the way the story is told. Much like the story in Eco and Shadow of the Colossus, a lot of the story details are withheld, and you have to sort of get cues from the environment as well as the item descriptions in order to try and piece things together. Eco and Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian were much more minimalist in that regard, but Dark Souls took from that and sort of did its own thing with it. And now we have probably like just hundreds of YouTube channels just dedicated to try and understand what is going on in all these games. So, yeah. All right.
It's so good.
Yeah, so good. All right, number 4.
Number 4 for me is Final Fantasy VII.
Nice.
Ooh,
is there a kick here?
Well,
Casen, you have
I have it as well, but I don't think I have it. Oh, no, I do. I have it even higher than you do.
Okay, so we'll kick that one for the time being.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3 for me is Pokemon Red and Blue.
I thought about this. I was this close to putting it on the list.
I think the only reason that I would put this, again, this list is not a list of my personal favorites of these games going down. I obviously like Final Fantasy VII, probably every game on this list that I've mentioned so far better than Pokemon. I have actually never played a Pokemon game outside of Blue, which was the one that my brother had read. So I'm not like the biggest Pokemon fan in the world, but it's undeniable its cultural impact, particularly during that time. Every freaking kid on Earth had Pokemon.
Yep.
In one form or another, right?
Yeah, if it wasn't the game, it was the cards.
Exactly. Or they watched
and
the
if
show.
it wasn't the cards, they're watching the anime.
Yeah.
So Pokemon was just unbelievably popular. I know it still is, but I don't know if it's the same, where it's just ubiquitous with being in elementary school. you are playing Pokemon in some fashion.
As a father of children who are attending elementary school at the moment, yes, it absolutely is. My kids have never played a game. We don't have any of the cards, although I think we do have a card or two that we use as bookmarks, but we don't have the cards, generally speaking. We've just acquired them. I think for Halloween somebody gave out a Pokemon card, and so it's like, oh, great. But my kids know like 100 Pokemon names. For sure.
Yeah.
Because it's still that ubiquitous. Kids with Pokemon backpacks, everyone's talking about it. My kids still know all about Pokemon, despite really never seeing the show and never like playing the game. Or
somehow
even really
you know what all the Pokemon's names are. It's just because you got to catch them all, man.
It's like that's descriptive, not prescriptive. It's like you really can't help but catch them all. It's pervading the environment into your mind.
I haven't played a Pokemon game in over 20 years, but somebody could show me a picture of a Pokemon and be like, oh yeah, that's Gyarados.
Yeah. Well,
you know what they are.
What else is wild is that Pokemon has better name recognition and is a higher value IP than even Mario.
Yeah. To a large degree, I think particularly, kind of in, those late 90s years. And probably,
that's the real start, yeah.
Probably now, too, to a certain degree. But,
yeah.
The reason I put this on the list is because I have never been much of a mobile gamer. I've had handhelds over the years, and I keep buying them thinking I'll use them, and then they get very little use, really.
Yeah.
Unless it's outside of one very specific system seller type game, maybe like a Fire Emblem Awakening or something like that.
Oh, right.
Where I got really addicted to that and played it a lot. There are very few mobile games that have that sort of long term kind of appeal for me. I put them down pretty quick. And I still haven't learned my lesson. I have a Steam Deck that I've barely freaking used. I have almost never used my Nintendo Switch outside of its docked mode. We talked about this in a recent episode. So I just like playing on a TV. It's just the way I am. And I felt that way even then. I was never all that interested in Game Boy. And then I got a Game Boy specifically to play Pokemon.
Yeah.
Because my brother got it, and he had the red version, and he was like, you got to get the blue version because there's certain Pokemon I can't get. I need you to trade them. So it's almost like I was doing him a favor.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay, I'll get it for you.
Yeah, because we had like a paper route that we had as a job at the time, so we made a little bit of money, even though we were, pretty young. I want to say I was 10 years old, 11 years old. Something like a local, just like community newspaper that they kind of allowed kids to do and make a little money.
Yep.
So rather than going and buying the Star Wars action figures that I wanted, or maybe the ships, something like that, I was like, fine, I'll save a little bit, get a Game Boy and Pokemon so I can like help you out getting the Pokemon. But I fell in love with it. And I often talk about how Final Fantasy VII was my first real RPG experience. It's not technically true because of this.
Right.
This really was the first one. And just the level of obsession. I mean, we just recently played and talked about Expedition 33 on our channel.
Right.
And there are very few games. The reason why this is such a big deal to me is because I can't stop thinking about that game when I walk away from it. If I'm going to bed, if I'm going to work, if I have to go to the freaking store or run errands or do chores or whatever, I can't stop thinking about Expedition 33.
Man, you're killing me. I want to play it so bad. I haven't had the time.
You have to, man.
It's unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had that experience where I'm just obsessing about a game probably since like Dark Souls, and then before that it was Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time, and then but the first game I can remember doing that with was Pokemon, where like every second of my free time I wanted to be spending playing it and wanted to catch them all. And you're trying all of this game had a ton of rumors where kids at school would tell you could do things that were definitely not possible in the game.
Yeah. Or you could get Yoshi.
Anyway.
Yoshi was a secret Pokemon.
Or you could get Mew by looking under the truck.
Yes. There were a whole bunch of others. There were some really, I think probably even region-specific ones where you got to have the game on for a certain amount of time, which was totally bogus because the batteries would have run out by then. and you got to turn the thing upside down and do this and that, and then you can get like
You gotta put in
infinite
the
rare
Konami
candies or
code.
something like that.
Yeah, Konami code. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So I got all into that. It was definitely a playground game for me. You go to the school the next day and you're talking with your buddies and your friends about it, and you're saying what you have and what they have, and you're trading constantly. And it was a problem. They banned Pokemon from school. You couldn't bring your Game Boy to school.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was amazing, and it's the only Pokemon game I've played. And if I ever play a Pokemon game again, it will probably be like Red and Blue.
Yeah.
To just go back and experience the nostalgia of it all. So.
Oh man,
Dope.
I considered Pokemon Red and Blue, but for some reason I didn't give it much more thought. Now I'm wanting to replace Grand Theft Auto 3 with that. Jeez.
Well, I mean, and it was because of that we ended up watching the anime, and we ended up collecting the cards and all the other things. We had our binders with, all the little cards in them.
I still have my cards somewhere. I don't know. They're probably not worth much, but I've heard Pokemon cards lately they're on the up in terms of value.
Yeah,
so
you got that old school Charizard, man.
If you have an old first edition Charizard mint, right? And if you take that and get it certified, by I don't even know how this works, but there's a way to certify it for what it is. That thing's worth like $200,000. Like that is wild how much Pokemon cards are worth now.
Yeah, Magic the Gathering's the same way. I'm a little bit familiar with that. I was making a documentary on it for a while. The original art, the ones they scanned to put on the cards.
Oh,
I wonder if there is a market for that with Pokemon, like the alpha or the first set. Maybe there is. I don't know.
I'll bet.
Man, why did I have to choose Yu-Gi-Oh, man?
Yu-Gi-Oh, is that what your thing? At least it wasn't Digimon, right?
No, it wasn't. No, it was Yu-Gi-Oh. Like I have old school, like first edition Exodia, the Obliterator, but
no one cares, right? It's worth like $3.
Oh well.
Oh man, you never know. You know what's funny? My first introduction to Pokemon was the anime, and then the cards. I didn't play the game until later. My brothers played the game, but I didn't. I wasn't into handheld gaming either. It's still not a thing I do much, except when Pokemon Go came out. I was walking around the park playing that for a while. That was fun. Yeah, that was good times.
That was a phenomenon. I actually never tried Pokemon Go.
No, neither did I.
I never did.
I'm right there with you, Mike. It's because I knew it would consume my life.
It got me outside. It got me walking. It got me moving.
Yeah, I should have used that excuse. All right, what's your number 2, man?
Well, here's the thing.
Kind of flip.
I thought I had done this list correctly. I think I didn't, because I think I'm actually missing one.
Uh-oh. You want to borrow one of mine?
No, I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to roll with this, even though this may or may not be my favorite pick, and maybe I wouldn't have put it as high as if I had realized it was going to fall where it was going to fall. Maybe I would have put it at number 9 or 10 or something, but do with that what you will. Pac-Man.
Yo, kick.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. You have Pac-Man higher than 2.
Well, actually, okay, I'm saying kick, but I haven't read my 6 through 2 yet. And
gotcha.
But actually, that's interesting. Max, how do we do this? Yeah, I've got it ranked way lower than him, but I don't go till after him,
well, why don't you say where it is on your list?
Number 6. It's number 6.
Okay, all right. So let's have the discussion now.
Okay, let's do it.
So here's the reason I'm putting it on there. I don't necessarily love Pac-Man or have a ton of passion for Pac-Man personally. I have played it a lot, but it's because my mother had it. So it's the first video game I have any memory of.
Me too.
The first time I remember the concept of a video game was my mother sitting on the floor of the living room playing the NES, playing Pac-Man.
Wow.
I was too young to be able to understand how it works. I was probably 2 years old, if not younger maybe than that. It's one of my very first memories is my mother playing Pac-Man.
Wow.
And the reason that sticks out to me is because my mother was very against us having video games in the house when we got old enough to start playing them and playing them a lot. And she did not like that. So the thing is that NES, we got robbed. Our house got robbed. And so that NES was stolen.
Oh, man.
And so we got another one eventually, but it wasn't until 1993. So the Super Nintendo was already out at that point, right? And so even at that point, when I'm playing The Tecmo Super Bowl, that's another one I could put on here, actually. I'm just going to do this really, really briefly because it had like full seasons. The way that it influenced sports games after this, in particular, Madden being as big as it is today, the simulation aspect of it, because most games were very arcadey. There's another reason why Gran Turismo would be a good pick, because a lot of racing games were very arcadey before that, and that brought a lot of the simulation aspect, real cars, that sort of thing. So Tecmo Super Bowl is very arcadey, but it brought in really cool simulation aspects, like you can play a full season. It has all of the licensed NFL teams in it. Things like that were very novel and, kind of ahead of their time in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Pac-Man. My mother did not like us playing video games, but there are a few games she has gotten addicted to that she played more than us. So Mario Kart was one of them. We could not get her off of Mario Kart 64. She would play it way more than us. She raced as Donkey Kong for some reason. There was... another like PC game we had. Well, it's basically Tetris. I'll just call it Tetris. That's another one she got really addicted to. But it was Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games. And
I played that too.
You
played
did?
the crap out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really fun. So it's just a bunch of mini games. You run around and play a bunch of, kind of basic mini games. But one of them is a Tetris-like game that she got obsessed with. She played that a ton. And then it was Pac-Man. And when you look into the history of Pac-Man, a lot of the thought that went into designing that game was specifically to get women playing games.
Oh, interesting.
Because games were full of smelly dudes who just went in there and played Missile Command and stuff like that for hours and hours and hours. And they were like, how can we get women interested in games? And Pac-Man, a large part of the thought process that went into it was specifically for that reason. And one of my first memories of ever seeing a video game in my entire life was my mother, who is not a gamer, playing Pac-Man for hours and just kind of watching her play. And so I think it's very influential and worth mentioning for that reason alone. I think it brought in a new audience. It expanded who games were for so that you're not just shooting aliens and killing things. There was a cute little character eating cookies and running away from ghosts. And the sound was a big part of it too. And exactly. So it was cute, and it brought a lot of women into arcades, and I think that's worth mentioning.
That's funny. You talk about your first memory with your mother playing Pac-Man. You could probably do a Patronus charm based off that memory.
I totally could.
I just feel like, can you think of any earlier memories than that? Oh, well, my first memory with my mother is her playing Pac-Man. Like, yes, that'll work. Do it. There is a Pac-Man box, an arcade box at my local library of Pac-Man. This game is just everywhere. It is so ubiquitous. Everyone knows Pac-Man. I think, as I'd mentioned, the Pokemon actually has higher name recognition than Super Mario, and the value of the brand is worth more than Mario. I think the only character that has wider name recognition than Pokemon is Pac-Man. That game is just and some of my earliest memories of Pac-Man are not with the NES or any home console. It was actually a friend of mine whose older brother, like in the basement, they had a Pac-Man arcade in their basement. And I remember playing that game like crazy. I was obsessed with it because I feel like this game is so brilliant. The design of it is so brilliant. You feel like you understand it just based on like 2 or 3 minutes with it. You're like, oh, even when you die by the ghost, it's like, oh, I know exactly what I should have done to avoid that, right? It's like, it's so clear. And then immediately you go back, you do something different again, but then you start to get into a weird spot and the ghosts aren't where you thought they'd be, and you died again. Okay, but I know how to not do that again, right? And then you go, and you got a time when you get the fruit, and you got a time when you get the big cookies. And you've got to like, okay, I get it. And it's just so brilliant to have designed a game in such a way to where as soon as people died, they knew exactly what they needed to do so that they can get a little bit further the next time. And Pac-Man perfected that, absolutely. So that's why I would have it ranked number 6 is where I've got it.
Nice. Yeah, there's something so numinous just about the way that game was designed that the oldest version of it can still live on and still be enjoyed as it was. It's sort of like Tetris in that way as well.
Yes, Tetris. Yeah. Pac-Man and Tetris will never die.
Yes.
They're two simple, and they're too perfect.
They're too refined, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to your list, Casen. So we got number 6.
6 through 2, that was it. Pac-Man was my number 6. Just wonderful. Even my kids know Pac-Man, and they're young, so that's really something. So we're going on to number 5 now. Number 5 is Pong. And the reason why I put it here, it is not the oldest game ever. I used to think it was. It's not. By like a decade and a half, it's not. But it is the oldest game that I've ever personally played, in my life. And that game, it's so funny because people would always joke about Pong and talk about how Pong is just this silly game. It was just like 2 sticks and then a little square ball, and that's like the whole game. There's nothing really more to it than that. And it was often the butt of jokes as I was growing up, that Pong, or whenever we'd show our dad like like a GameCube game or something, and he would join us like once a year. He would show up and like play games with us for like half an hour or whatever, and we'd always like tease him and be like, you remember Pong? And my dad loved Pong when he was a kid, of course. But it was like the joke of like, yeah, things have come a long way since Pong, huh, Dad? Like just excited that he was finally playing games with us. But Pong legitimately interested me, and I was very upset that I did not have a way to play it. Like, this is an old game. I thought I really just needed an Atari to play it. I'd heard about it, I've seen it, and I'm just like, I like air hockey, right? I think air hockey's super fun. We ended up getting an air hockey table because, at my request, after a very long time, when we lived in Arizona, back when I was in like middle school. And the thing about that type of game is like really interests me. But the trouble with air hockey is that you need somebody else to play against, and it wasn't very common for me to get people to play with me. I was actually quite good at air hockey, but I always just wanted to play Pong. And I remember I finally was able to do it because there's a game that included Pong as a mini game in like it's like the Pac-Man game or something, or maybe there was just like a retro arcade, but it ended up being released for consoles. And I was finally able to play Pong, and it is more complicated than it looks. The ball starts going faster and faster and faster and faster as it goes. And the mechanics, it's not easy at all. It's actually a difficult game to play, and I had an absolute blast playing it. And for years and years and years, I had this secret longing in the back of my mind to finally play the first game, Pong, which is not true, but is what I thought was true. And I also like tennis, and I just love sports games like that. And I always wanted to play it, and I never really got to. And by the time I even did, no one wanted to play it with me. So just I was born too late, right? Have you ever heard that song from, I can't remember who made that song. Yeah, I was born, do you know, I'll look it up later, and I'll maybe send it to you. There's a famous song from somebody's from like the 90s. I was born too late. I feel that so heavily. I was just born a little bit too late to have really taken advantage of Pong. But that game, obviously, really popularized entertaining video games that can be, even enjoyed at home and stuff. And, it was a big deal back in the 70s when it came out. And also, the first video game ever is really murky and difficult to like pin down because a lot of people were just experimentally just kind of creating things and, this is a fun little thing that I made, right? But it never really went anywhere. It was never intended for entertainment or for use or anything like that. So in 1958, there was a game called Tennis for Two, and it was sort of like Pong. It was played on this weird, almost like a radar, like a satellite radar system. Yep. And then you have this like light that like goes back and forth. You don't even see the paddles. You're just pushing the button, assuming where the paddles are, right? And you're trying to beat the other person. But there's something about just like tennis as a primitive like video game that seems, I don't know, there's something to it. Even when I first got the Virtual Boy, one of the first games that we had on the Virtual Boy was Mario Tennis, and I loved it so much. I always love all of the tennis games wherever I can get them. I think they're wonderful. And so Pong goes on the list right there. Boom, number 5.
Nice.
Number 4 is Donkey Kong for the arcade in 1981.
Yeah.
This one has to go on the list in my mind because this is the beginning of Donkey Kong and Mario and Princess Peach, and like it's all right there. There's just this like trifecta, and it's great because the machine was essentially, so Gunpei Yokoi was tasked with kind of changing an arcade box into some other game that would be fun, and he was supposed to reprogram the arcade because they had made it into an arcade game that didn't sell anymore, right? And so Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was the CEO of Nintendo at the time, he had tasked Gunpei Yokoi, who created the Game Boy and a bunch of other stuff back in Nintendo's history, with repurposing this arcade box into something that could be sold, maybe even at a loss. They just didn't want to have nothing to do with it. Arcades take up tons of inventory space. They had thousands of these, and they didn't know what to do with them. So Yokoi, kind of like almost off the street, finds one of their employees, a young go-getter by the name of Shigeru Miyamoto, who was like 21. He just graduated college. Shigeru Miyamoto, I don't know, the guy, man. And he had just graduated college. He was an artist. His job, Miyamoto's job, was just to paint like the art on the side of the arcades that Nintendo made, right? And Hiroshi Yamauchi told Gunpei Yokoi he could not take any programmers or engineers to reprogram or re-engineer these arcade boxes. He just had to find somebody else that wasn't already working on something at the time. And so he was like, hey, Miyamoto, do you want to make a game? I don't know, like, it's a good opportunity for you to like do something else. And Miyamoto was like, sure. So he made this Donkey Kong game with Jumpman and what was her name at the time? They bring it up in Mario Odyssey. The princess. She's that red, the girl that wears red in Mario Odyssey. It's like Patricia or
can't remember.
No,
something like that. Yeah,
can't remember her name, but she had a different name technically at the time. But it's Princess Peach, is what it is.
Right.
And so he brings Miyamoto on, and together they reprogram the arcades into something that ultimately, like when all was said and done, after a couple of years, had made them like $1 billion because Donkey Kong was that popular. And immediately Miyamoto was put in charge of their R&D division 1, I think, to make Super Mario Brothers after that. Because he had done such a good job. And of course, Gunpei Yokoi, he was just doing wonderful things within the company. Nintendo wouldn't have been anything without those two guys. And this is where they really made their big bang entrance into the gaming world. And as the foundation of Mario, Donkey Kong, and Princess Peach, I just got to say, like, this is one of the most important games ever made. And it is legitimately fun. If you've ever played that game before, it is a blast to jump over barrels and to try to get the princess from Donkey Kong. It's wonderful, wonderful game.
It's another game that, from a sound design perspective, is also super iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Like just
That's right.
The sounds you hear, those sounds, you know exactly what it's from.
Yeah.
So I really like it for that reason.
There are untouched tribes in the Amazon that can recognize those sounds.
Yeah. I'll bet you it has pervaded the collective unconscious so heavily that I'm sure people have dreams about this without even knowing what was that. What was that? I was jumping over barrels and I was rescuing a princess from a monkey. What was that? I love it.
And I apologize to everybody that's like, oh, all Max ever does is talk about Young. We tried to go the whole thing with him. But it wasn't me this time, okay? No.
We've had the same thing.
Right.
We've had to like promise to stop talking about Jung for like 2 months or something, like just for a little while, because he just pervades most artistic stuff, you know.
Yeah,
that's just
it's inescapable. It was an comparison. Yeah.
All right, good. Number 3, Final Fantasy VII. Nice. Mike had this at number 4, and so
I did.
I kicked him on it because I have it at number 3. And it's wild for me because I do not have Final Fantasy on this list. I feel like I should if I'm going to have Final Fantasy VII. Just like I feel like I should have had The Legend of Zelda if I was going to put Ocarina of Time on here. But spoiler alert, I did not do the original Zelda or the original Final Fantasy. It's not always the first foundational iteration, as Mike mentioned previously. Right. It's not always the first one that gets all the credit, right? Just like what you said about Dark Souls and Demon Souls, right? The fact that Final Fantasy VII is the 7th Final Fantasy. It's actually more than that if you count some of the other rebrands and stuff that they did. But like Mystic Quest and whatnot. It's the way that they jumped onto the new, at the time, Sony PlayStation with such a bang, and that everybody knew that this was going to happen. The people at Squaresoft knew they had something special, and Sony did too. Sony was like, that game, first off, Like, we're going to help you market this thing because this is special. Sony knew immediately that's going to sell PlayStation units, and fronted them a ton of money for marketing, and exclusivity and all of that stuff that lasted for a very long time. And the reason being is because Final Fantasy VII did something that the other ones weren't able to do. It sold like 10 million units. It just dominated. Even at the time, I didn't have a PlayStation, but all the kids at the time, back when I was, 10 or so, when this game came out, all the kids on the street were talking about it, and you were a cool kid if you had played any other Final Fantasy other than 7. So there were always people who were like, "Oh yeah, I played Final Fantasy 5," and I'm just like, "What? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about." Like, the older kids would always have some, "Oh, I played Final Fantasy 6 or 3 as it was called," and like, you were cool if you could talk about that, because all I have played was 7, and I hadn't even played it at the time. I played it a little bit later with Mike, but the way that game used cinematics, the way that game used a big sword and just spiky hair, and the way that it kind of brought some elements of Japanese culture that most Americans just weren't aware of, just straight to the forefront in a way that everyone thought was cool. I know some people love to hate on FF7 nowadays because it was so popular, right? You get the contrarian kind of persuasion. But dude, exactly. It was that popular for a reason. This game was a cultural force, and it changed a bunch of games even after it. Games kind of gave, because it sold so well, it gave game developers permission to, even in these high budget, games, include maybe some deeper philosophical stuff that often they were afraid of because, maybe the kids aren't ready for that yet, It's like, no, FF7 proved people wrong on that front. And also gave other game devs permission to take some more risks, I think, and to maybe open up and to gosh, I don't know, just to
show what video games could be.
Show it. Yeah, there you go. To show what video games could be. FF7, because other games had done that before, but they didn't also sell 10 million copies while doing that. FF7 showed that you can do it. There's a way that you can make a game with all that deep stuff in it and have it sell well. And there you go. They just did it. Now have at it. See what you can do.
And because it was so good, it went from being a genre that was sort of niche to its country of origin. And it brought a whole bunch of other JRPGs to a certain degree of success in the West. Games like Parasite Eve, Xenogears,
that's right.
Suikoden, Star Ocean. And I'm sure there's other ones that I can mention.
Oh, tons, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's really funny about this game is there were two things in particular that developers were really shooting for. It was their sort of dream in the sky to achieve two things on this. And it had been since basically the beginning of the series. One was to outsell Dragon Quest.
Yeah, that's right.
It just at all. Just we need to beat them on one of these. And they had never done that.
Right.
Two was to sell 1 million units. The game did more than 10 times that.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when we're talking about the level of success this game had, it really can't be understated how completely out of the atmosphere successful it was based on even the most optimistic projections for a turn-based Japanese role-playing game to have ever been as popular as this was unthinkable. It was such a niche genre already that had a lot more popularity in Japan than it did in the West.
That's true, yeah.
Territories. Yeah. And so this was what made that genre popular outside of Japan. It was this game. It's not that there weren't other really great Japanese role-playing games before this. Suikoden 1 came out before this game.
Right.
Of course, Final Fantasy VI, which many people argue is better than Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
I'm not going to have that argument here. The game series had already had many classic, all-time great games in it. But this was a cultural phenomenon in such a way to where I have had similar experiences like I talked about with Pac-Man. Like my mother is playing a video game, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There are people I come across today, whether it's businessmen, people you would never think They're not gamers. They may have only played this and like Mega Man before in their life, but they played this.
Yeah.
There was a guy who came to my house trying to sell, I think it was pest control or something. And, you know, what they try to do, they try to build rapport. They try to get you talking about, oh, your podcast, what do you do? We talk about this. Oh, man, I played Final Fantasy VII back in the day. And guy has never touched a video game since. Yeah. What I'm saying is that, like, that's the kind of game this was. And it's not the type of game that should have had that kind of mass appeal. It didn't make sense for it to have that kind of mass appeal. Right. And it did. And in large part, it's because of its style, its music, its it being a 3D game and that being a really kind of cool new thing at the time in terms of the tech. Yeah. But I also think it's the story. I think the story and the characters and a lot of the deeper meaning that is there, whether you're thinking about the game on that level or not, I certainly wasn't when I was 10, 11, 12 years old.
Right.
Well, at least not consciously. You know, what I'm consciously thinking is the Buster Sword's freaking awesome.
Yeah, dude.
Oh my gosh, this crazy freaking pervert's gonna, like, you know, mess with my girlfriend or whatever. Yeah. I gotta stop that. You know, these are the types of, you know, thoughts I'm having as a child. But in the back there somewhere, I'm also thinking about environmental impact. Is putting gasoline in my car something that hurts the planet? Are corporations, the greed of corporations, you know, something that we need to be thinking more about? These are things that I'm having thoughts about for the first time as a child. And I just think that the story of Final Fantasy VII has impact on a lot of different levels. And it certainly, for me, showed me that video games could be a lot more than just toys or, you know, just like escapist fantasy. It could be something that's a real work of art. And so that's why the game's special to me.
All said. All right.
Dope.
So what's your number two, Casen?
My number two, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So I think, Mike, you had this one as well, right?
I did.
I
Number 8.
don't have as much to say about this one as I did the last couple, other than say it's just a great game. And honestly, it has such a great story. And when I say that Ocarina of Time has a great story, I'm not saying it's the most complex, like adult-themed, you know, like thriller that you've ever heard. I'm just saying it solidly did a great job on just a simple classic story. And, you know, some people would say, oh, you can't screw that up. Yeah, I've seen it screwed up many times. The story of the hero, you know, traveling the world to gain the resources necessary to fight the dragon and save the princess and thus the kingdom, is just one of the classic stories of all time. And they aren't afraid to tell that story, right? And it's so funny because, I remember some people at the time in the 90s were thinking, hey, you know, especially after FF7 came out, there's a forum, I think you can still search it up today, where people are arguing about how, since FF7 changed the game, Zelda's going to fail now and it's not going to sell anymore because people don't like simple stories anymore. And it's like, look, man, simple stories are powerful. And they've been told for a million, I don't know how long. Can't really track that. They've been told for at least tens of thousands of years for a reason, because this is, at least in part, like almost an archetype of how the mind even works, right? And Zelda just tells that story in a way that captures the teenage boy's imagination, and it certainly captured mine. And I remember just daydreaming and night dreaming all about this game all the time. It just dominated my mind. It dominated my life. And so many game mechanics and games that have come since really have borrowed pretty heavily from all the Zelda games, of course. Just any action-adventure game that you play nowadays has that influence. But Ocarina of Time is probably the biggest one that influences all of the 3D game adventure action games that come out today, like things like maybe The Witcher 3 and whatnot. Yeah. Ocarina of Time is hiding behind all of that. And the game mechanics coupled with just a wonderful story that I love. and coupled with the character of Link as a silent protagonist, that I'm not saying every game has to do that, but this series of games have chosen to do that, and I think the results are wonderful. That Link is such a great character because he is a relatively blank slate for whoever's playing to kind of, put their emotions into and feel like they are, going about the world as this character. It really helps. It's wonderful. Love the game, and I think it has had an immeasurable impact. It's one of the most important games ever made.
Yeah. If GTA 3 was the predicate for every open world game that has released since 2001, Ocarina of Time was the predicate for every adventure game since 1998.
Yep.
I think it was speaking of Grand Theft Auto 3, I think it was the guys behind that, one of them, that said that GTA 3 was basically Zelda meets Goodfellas. And anybody
that's interesting.
Yeah. And he also said that anybody who makes 3D games who says they've not borrowed something from Zelda on the 64 is lying.
They are lying. They are straight up lying to your face.
Yeah.
100% true. I can't say enough about how impactful this game was on me. I've said it many times in our own videos, so I won't try to repeat myself too much, but I have played this game more than any other game in my life.
Yeah.
It came at a time where I didn't have a video game console in my house for a long time. My mom got the N64, finally gave in for Christmas. And it transformed my entire view of what a video game could be. I felt like I was losing myself in another world. And it was magical. And I just played it over and 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 over. Largely because it was one of the only games we had, but also just because it was that thrilling for me. I could not get enough of it. And probably to my own detriment, at this point, going back to it has very little for me. I can't really replay it much and get a lot of enjoyment because I've done it so many times and know everything about it. But
you ever try to speedrun it?
I haven't. I've never really gotten into speedrunning personally.
Neither,
I don't know why that is, because Casen's brother Parker, he really gets into kind of following speedruns, and we'd try to get me into
the
it.
Glitches.
There was nothing there that excited me enough to really get into speedrunning, and I'm not trying to say that as a criticism or anything. It's just for whatever reason it doesn't. But I think I know it well enough to where I could try it, but I just don't have a ton of interest.
Fair enough.
And plus, there are people out there who are so
good,
so unbelievably good at it.
They beat the game in 5 seconds. Yeah, it's wild.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, yeah, it was one of those. It's probably the most impactful video game I've played. In a lot of ways, it's almost like my first real video game. I had played video games before this, and I had played them a lot. Super Mario Brothers 3 on the NES. I played that a lot and loved that, and some others. But I had always wanted first to go out and play basketball, or I would rather probably be doing something else, but it's raining outside that day. You know what I mean? But Zelda was that was my primary thing. I cared about that more than anything else, and it sort of made me into a gamer in a way that nothing else had before that. So and going on what Casen was saying, its impact on the industry is, still so evident. And again, the camera, the Z targeting,
that was huge.
Targeting as a thing did not really exist before this game. And that's a mechanic you see in games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring and whatnot. That originated in Ocarina of Time.
Camera systems pre-2001 sucked, man. And Zelda was one of the few franchises that got it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone still experimented, but in the end, they had to fall in line. Zelda had it right.
It did it the right way. Even better than Mario 64, which was already itself really good.
That's right.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's all of our 6 through 2s. Now it's the moment, and
this is the moment.
I don't know.
It's where the gloves come off.
Right. This one I don't know. We watch each other's channels. I actually put out a video on my channel called "The Most Important Game Ever Made." I don't know. I just want to know if you guys know what the game is yet before I say it, because it might shock you.
Metal Gear Solid 2.
No. No, that's no.
That's the most philosophical
that was the most
game ever made.
powerful
the most
moment in
profound
gaming.
moment.
The most profound moment in gaming.
Right.
That's the highest viewed video on your channel, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So I was afraid to watch that video of yours, Max. I was afraid to watch it.
Okay.
I remember.
All right, so get ready. This is probably gonna shock a bunch of people. Then, my number one is Deus Ex.
Ooh.
Oh, that's right. I have seen this video from.
Okay.
I do remember.
Yeah.
I remember it too because I remember it's in the thumbnail.
From yes, so from 2000. Look,
I remember this game.
Deus Ex. There's so many things about this game that people just sort of take for granted in modern game design, and it can all be traced back to this game. Fundamentally, if I were to, I want to try and keep this brief because I could just talk for half an hour why this game is so important. But if I were to summarize it in a sentence, it's how the game empowers the player to think for themselves through both the gameplay and the story. And the way that the game was designed around pursuing that influenced countless numbers of games after that. So in terms of gameplay, prior to Deus Ex, games could only really be one thing. And any game that wasn't just one thing was incredibly niche. So, for example, Doom. Doom, you could like tear down tons of monsters. But let's say you're not good at first-person shooter games, and maybe you want to sneak past them. Or if it's an RPG, you want to try and talk things out with them. If that's impossible. But you couldn't do that. Or, let's say it's like, I mentioned the Dark Project before. Great stealth game.
Thief.
But try to play it as an RPG or an action game, like maybe you kind of like what you would do with a Bethesda RPG or something like that. You couldn't do that back then. But then Deus Ex comes along, and it's like, okay, how can we create a simulative game? It literally was a part of a genre called an immersive simulator, where we can let the player do whatever the hell they want, come up with their own solutions in order to be able to progress forward. And Deus Ex is cited by so many games that came after that for showing that, hey, you can do this. Games like BioShock, Stalker, the Fallout and Elder Scrolls RPGs, Pathologic. The list just goes on and on and on. And if it weren't for Deus Ex coming along and popularizing that, who knows how much longer it would have taken. And, granted, System Shock 2 did do some of this beforehand,
right? But
it didn't reach the refinement and the popularity that Deus Ex did. Now, on the story side, this game predicted the future. Full stop. And I'm not talking about the meme that goes around about this game is that it predicted 9/11. No, that totally distracts from the conversation. Because if you look in the background of the first level of that game, at the New York City skyline, you don't see the two towers, even though the game came out before 9/11. So for it not to be there, it's kind of chilling, but still, what I'm saying in regards to how it predicted the future is how the game, and this is sort of paraphrasing the writer of the game, Sheldon Picotti. He said, if the game predicted anything, it's how America would respond to terrorism in the 21st century. So, how following 9/11, there was the establishment of Homeland Security.
The Patriot Act.
And the Patriot Act, and how, surveillance and all that, the stuff that Edward Snowden exposed. Well, Deus Ex, it parallels so much of what happened in Deus Ex. Instead of Homeland Security being established, it was UNATCO. And instead of all the, surveillance of electronic devices and peering through your camera, it was the Echelon Project. Now, you have to be sort of careful when you talk about this sort of stuff when it comes to Deus Ex, because part of the game's identity is it mixes in a lot of real-world conspiracies in with the game. But the reason why it does that is it's because it's trying to encourage the gamer to try and distinguish what's real from what's not. And there's so much of that it's intertwined with the game's RPG systems, but also with the game's story. And so it's just the way that both the story and the gameplay, there's no other game that, at least at that time, really made the gamer try to think for themselves. And it was just so prescient on so many different things that, yeah, I had to stop myself now because otherwise I'll just go on and on. But yeah, it's a
good game, Max. It's a good game. We get it.
Yeah, so that's it.
Wasn't Warren Spector one of the
That's right.
lead developers on this game? Yeah, I like Warren a lot. I think he's super good.
Epic Mickey is so underrated.
I put it on my list of most underrated games of all time.
Nice.
I've got it. My kids like it.
Oh, did you get it?
Yeah, I got it
game.
just in December, I think, for Christmas.
It's great.
There's
game.
that re-release that they did of it. So I have not played Deus Ex. My older brother, played it like crazy. He loved that game. I have not actually played it, so I can't actually comment to the story or anything like that. But it sounds pretty dope. You sold it pretty well.
It's good. Yeah. I would recommend it for sure. It's an awesome game.
Nice.
Aside from Nier Automata, I think it's probably the most profound game ever made.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And now, if I'm not mistaken, you guys both have the same number 1?
We'll see.
Okay.
It's Super Mario Brothers.
Oh,
right?
no. We got different number ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had Super Mario Brothers at number 7, right, Casen?
I did at number 7, yeah. And so
Okay,
but I didn't get to talk about it.
Okay.
Because Mike hogged it with his number 1.
I mean, the reason why I put this in number 1 might seem pretty obvious. It's among the leading reasons why the video game industry had the rebound that it had after the crash in the early 80s. And it is also the best-selling franchise of all time.
Yep.
It is the Mickey Mouse of video games. Mario is.
Right, yeah.
He's the most recognizable video game character that there is.
Period.
And when I think it's just a name, it's an IP that is, we keep using the word ubiquitous, but ubiquitous with video gaming. Everybody knows Mario. Everybody has played Mario. Everybody loves Mario. Unless for some reason you were a Sega Genesis kid and you just had a beef, but secretly you actually really liked it.
I would hope that you've grown out of that by now. It's been about 30 years.
Hey, man. Sega Genesis. What was it? Sega does what Nintendo don't.
That's right.
Yes, Sega does what Nintendo don't. That was a great slogan. That was really, really good marketing.
Yeah, it was.
How did the Saturn work out for you?
I think I've ever heard.
About as well as the GameCube.
Anyway,
Right.
I don't even think I need to really go on as to why this deserves to be number 1 in terms of cultural impact, in terms of how it impacted the industry, in terms of how absolutely massively popular Mario is now. The fact that it is like the face of video games. Mario is the face of video games, period.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is just a really great game and it's still fun to play. A game that came out in 1985.
Yeah.
It came out on a home console that was much, much closer, and obviously didn't match, but was much closer to the arcade experience than something like the Atari 2600 was.
Right.
Where if you get the Pac-Man game on Atari, it's like, what the heck is this, dude? I was expecting what I saw in the arcade, and this is freaking trash.
I've never seen it, actually.
It's the Atari version of Pac-Man's horrible.
It's probably lower resolution, right?
Yeah, it's so bad. But the NES version, it matches a lot closer, right? It's much closer to that kind of experience, and it's in your home, and it basically shifted gaming in such a way to where, I mean, the Atari was obviously very popular, and a lot of people had it, but the NES set the precedent, and Mario was the flagship that set that precedent for what gaming would become for decades and decades afterwards. And so it is, I think, the number 1 most impactful game, most influential game, most popular video game, and in a lot of ways is maybe the most fun video game. Obviously, when we're talking about the series, Mario has gotten better since the first one, but this was what launched it, which is what set the foundation, and it's still really great. It
is. It's good. It's fun. And the level design is actually brilliant. It's genius level design. And it's not as simple as you would think, just a character running and jumping. Like the physics or the way that they programmed, the way he kind of like skids to a stop. Mm-hmm. Like when you stop moving, he doesn't just immediately stop. Like there's some give in the game that I think actually it makes it a little more challenging, but it also makes it a lot more interesting. It's not just as simple as you maybe remember it. There's a lot more complex kind of dynamics within the development and the programming of the game itself that really make it what it is. It's not it's just wonderful.
It's the embodiment of the phrase easy to pick up, difficult to master.
Oh yes. Yeah. Yes, which is like, gosh,
actually,
if you can do that.
Here's another testament to it. So I had my nephew over. I think he's 10 years old at this point. And he plays VR games a lot. So every time I go over there and I see him, he's got his VR headset on, his Meta Quest 2. Okay. And he's like playing some gorilla game where he's like flying around and like climbing stuff and he's just moving his arms like this. Or like, he's playing a ton of stuff. And so he was over here and we were playing some games and his attention span is quite short.
Okay.
It's hard to get him to pay attention or engage in something for a long period of time. So we were just flying through games, right? There's just like, lost my interest, that lost my interest, that lost my interest. We tried even new stuff on PS5, Astrobot. We tried Kenna, Bridge of Spirits. Games that are excellent games. I really, really love them. And he was losing interest pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then I got out my NES Classic just to see. And I threw up Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers, and he played that for like 3 hours straight.
Holy cow.
And he did not make it past level 2. So
but he just kept playing. Oh, that's cool.
He was struggling, right? He was really having a hard time. And meanwhile, he's over here playing these VR games, these more complex video games, and he's just really, really good at them. Even like Kenna, he was really good at the game, but it just was losing his attention pretty quickly. But he was very quickly able to control it. And we had a video recently where I talked about how difficult it is for some people who didn't grow up playing games to try to play like a modern game, and they can't even like control the camera, and they're just looking straight down and running off of cliffs, and they can't control it like at all.
Yes.
That wasn't his problem. He intuitively understands how to play games. But he could not play Mario very well. He was struggling with it big time, but he couldn't stop playing it. Like, that held his attention more than anything else. And I think that's a testament to how well designed it is by itself.
Yeah. 40 years on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost half a century old. And the game is just so perfectly refined in terms of controls, in terms of exploration, just the incentive to go back and play old levels just to find like the secret, like going down the green tubes and all that. And of course, just the most iconic piece of music in the history of games. You just never get tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're talking about sounds that everybody just intuitively knows through the collective unconscious. Everybody, I don't care where you are on the planet, everybody knows.
Yeah. Even people who haven't played the game, like my kids know that song. They've never played the first one. Although since you've just mentioned that, Mike, I'm gonna bust out my NES Classic. We're gonna do that. My kids got a lot of mileage out of Donkey Kong Country on the SNES Classic.
Yeah.
Ooh,
so I wonder if maybe taking a step back to Mario would be
see if they'll like it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So what's your number one, Casen?
My number one, I'm taking a step back from what all y'all are doing. I'm moving away from the most influential games for the entire industry, and I'm stepping into the most important game for me personally and for everyone if they would but just play it. Mm-hmm. So my plea to you all is to play the game called Xenogears. Xenogears is important. I believe it has actually influenced the video game industry quite a bit, especially in the maybe Japanese RPG subgenre of games.
Yeah.
But it's a little its impact is admittedly minimal compared to Mario and the other games we're talking about on this list. However, and this might actually go a little more along the lines with Deus Ex, what you were saying, Max. This game will change your life, in especially if you really pursue it and make an effort to try to understand exactly what it's saying or where it's going or what it's referencing. Mike and I did a 21 episode podcast on Xenogears, and I'm pretty sure, I haven't really spent much time doing this yet, but I'm pretty sure you'll see a pretty significant before after of me personally, between before, because that was the first time I'd played that game, and then after. that game introduced me to concepts. It reshaped. Well, it didn't. It instigated my reshaping of my own ideas, philosophies, everything. Things like spirituality and religion and psychology and, important people in the past and poetry and art and like what's the importance of all of this stuff and mechanics and even, artificial intelligence and things like robots and whatnot. Just like what are different ways to kind of reframe a possible future for humanity, as well as a possible past for humanity, because we don't really know exactly what has happened in our own species past. But this game, it threw enough curveballs to me, and it gave me enough to chew on that I don't think I landed anywhere near where the developers maybe possibly would have wanted me to land. But it got me to ruminate and to chew on some stuff and to maybe try other new things or ideas or philosophies that I otherwise would have maybe not cared to get into, especially maybe some of the more esoteric stuff. I started reading like Rudolf Steiner and like Manly P. Hall and people I never would have read before otherwise. But it's really kind of put me into this new place where I just find myself maybe more solidly myself. I feel like I understand myself better because I played Xenogears than I did before. And that game just massive impact on my life. And if you will play it, you may agree that it is one of the most important games ever made, albeit maybe not one of the most popular games ever made.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree with this. And the reason why I didn't include it is because the argument for it being one of the most important games has got to come from your personal life change, which is almost true with everyone I've ever talked to on a deep level about this game.
Yeah.
They have had some kind of life-altering experience with it. And so it is important deeply on the personal level, even if it will never be mentioned in any kind of list you'll see online or anything like that of the most important. You're going to make a documentary on the history of video games. Well, I'm pretty sure Xenogears not going to make it into that if you're making it for mass appeal on Netflix or something. It won't be mentioned, but it can't be understated how rich and deep and personal this game can be in as far as giving you some new ideas, introducing you to some philosophies, especially as a young person, where maybe you never would have considered that before. Maybe you've sat through a class in school where they talked about someone like Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud or something like this, but you didn't care.
Or it was like my class where they basically just made fun of Freud the whole time, and I didn't take him seriously until I played Xenogears. And it turns out Freud was an absolute genius, super brilliant, and a little quirky, but that's all anyone talks about in the high school class,
Yeah. So the game was made because the creator was fascinated by all of this philosophy.
Yeah.
But didn't think that if he went to any young person in the world would listen to all his thoughts on this stuff. So he hid it. He put it in there in secret into this mecha anime video game on the PlayStation. He snuck it in there. And for those who got obsessed enough with the game and would look up what those things were references to, that's how he was able to share his thoughts and feelings and ruminations on all of these great philosophers and thinkers that he and his wife, who kind of co-wrote the story with him, would talk about in their free time and would obsess over and what bonded them together as a couple. And it really is something that will change your life if you get into it with that mindset, rather than thinking about, oh my gosh, disc 2, what the heck happened to the game? If you're not looking at it, in the way gamers typically look at games and how they rate them, but rather on what this game is trying to say to you, which is many things, I don't think you can help but find something there that will really open your eyes and change the way you think. So it's a totally mind-bending, life-changing experience, and it is one of easily the most important games ever made.
Yeah, I want to try and further Steelman Casen's perspective here.
Yeah,
I think it's so Tetsuya Takahashi. He's the one that directed this game and all the other Xeno games. I once said that when Tetsuya Takahashi makes a game, he not only is trying to make the greatest game ever made, but the greatest game that will ever be made. And that's certainly the case with Xenogears. And I think what he created with Xenogears, it's of such a cerebral and emotional depth that if there is ever a point in the future where video games are studied for their cultural, intellectual, emotional value in the same way that books, movies, or whatever are studied at universities, if there's ever a point where that happens, I think that Xenogears will forever be at the top of like reading lists or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
just because lists. Playing lists. Yeah, just in terms of what that game can teach you, the depths to which it goes, how you could just think about it nonstop for the rest of your life. It's it's kind of like the War and Peace of video games in that way a little bit.
Right.
So yeah,
War and Peace is the Dark Souls of classic.
It is an intimidating read, that's for sure, how long it is.
Yeah, but I mean, if anybody can get away with it, it's Tolstoy. But yeah, I like to think Xenogears, maybe, to the consciousness of the present, might not be on the typical top 10 list, but I think in the future, if our efforts are what you guys do at Resident Arc, what I do, and other people like us do, are fruitful, Xenogears certainly will be. If not in the top 10, then number 1 in terms of the most important games ever made. So
that would be a world as it should be.
Absolutely. All right. And we're all tenured professors, and we get like $100,000s of dollars.
I know. Whenever that happens, it's like, hey guys, like, come on, man, come on.
So
professors get paid well, right?
Some of them do. Depends on.
Never mind. Y'all can have it. Y'all can have it.
Nice. All right. So that's our top 10 list, guys. I will put them on screen right now. So, while we're having that up there, I just figured we would conclude. Did you guys have any honorable mentions?
Oh, geez,
Tetris. I had a bunch.
I mean, I kind of had a thing here. So, I mean, we mentioned some of them, and you had some of them on your list.
Yeah,
so,
luckily.
Grand Theft Auto 3 was on there. StarCraft.
Oh yeah, StarCraft.
Yeah.
I played that.
Warcraft
I played that
3.
Tons.
SimCity.
SimCity
was on there for me. That's another game my mom played, actually. That was one more game that she played a lot, was SimCity. Space Invaders. I think you can't have a conversation like this without mentioning that there was a shortage of 100 yen coins in Japan because of Space Invaders at arcades.
Oh, that's funny.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. Alone in the Dark was another one I thought of. This was a huge predecessor for games like Resident Evil. So like that one I had on there. I had Wizardry, the original Wizardry 1981, directly influenced Hironobu Sakaguchi, who would like mod this game basically and like give himself more money and experience and stuff. That's how he learned how to make games.
Interesting.
And what led him to eventually make Final Fantasy.
Well, I was going to say Final Fantasy would be an honorable mention for me.
Final Fantasy is an honorable mention.
A good story within a game, yeah.
As well as Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior. Let's see, what other ones did I have on here? There's a whole lot. It was, like I said, it's really hard. Myst, 1993 was another one for me.
Yeah.
Ultima.
I think we mentioned Tetris. Ultima is another good one. So yeah, there's a lot. It was really, really hard for me to narrow us down.
I like the ultimate results that you guys both came up with.
Well, I also wanted GoldenEye to be on there. GoldenEye 64.
Yeah. Halo is another one too.
But I think Doom covered enough of GoldenEye. Between GoldenEye, Halo, and Doom, I kind of just had to go with Doom.
Yeah,
give it to Doom.
Yeah. As much as Halo is my I probably put more hours into Halo than any other game, but yeah, it's Doom obviously.
Yeah, it's
my honorable mentions, I got Metroid,
That's another
Ooh,
good
very
one.
good.
Because of all the Metroidvanias today, and Castlevania kind
right.
of right up there with Metroid too. Yeah.
Right. It's in the name of the genre. Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare.
Oh, that game!
That's another good
I put
one.
more.
Yeah.
That was my Halo. I played at least 1,000 hours of that game.
Okay. Yeah. I could never get into because I hate the fact that you die so quickly in Call of Duty. That's why I always loved Halo. But
You got to get
Yeah.
good, dude.
Get good. Well, they don't have shields. It's a little more realistic, right? That was kind of the idea.
Yeah, and look how we're choosing that side made me end up. Anyway, Half-Life 1 and 2.
Great games.
And Fortnite, I guess, and all the other ones. Like I have Pong and all that stuff on here. What about you, Casen?
Good. Really, for me, the biggest one would have been Tetris, I suppose, and then Final Fantasy. Gosh, there were a bunch of things. Oh, I did get rid of World of Warcraft. I had that on the list, and I ended up dropping that one. Well, I can't exactly remember all of them. But yeah, that'll about do it.
How can RuneScape not be on your
Because World of Warcraft was on the list. RuneScape is a little pitiful by comparison.
list? But RuneScape, did RuneScape come before?
It did.
Or after?
The
came
2D,
before.
the early version of RuneScape that we played back, when we were in junior high. We we were among the very first adopters of RuneScape ever. There was one world when we started playing RuneScape, and it was 2001, maybe 2002. And now there's like 1,000 worlds. But that game was wonderful. But I just couldn't say because I had already, EverQuest, and there were enough other games around that time that I wouldn't quite have put RuneScape above some of the other MMOs.
Yeah.
It was huge, though. I remember when I was in Christian school, like there were kids that would play that game on the computers when they weren't supposed to, and they got in so much trouble. RuneScape. Yeah, it was a blast, though. All right. Well, gentlemen, this has been fun. Very enlightening.
Totally.
I loved some of the diversity. I loved the way that you made some of the things like might have initially seemed out of the box choices, but actually makes a lot of sense. It's why I wanted to do this with you guys. So, to all the people that are watching, do you like our lists? Do you have any agreements, disagreements? We want to hear from all of you in the comment section below. Just obviously, please keep it civil. Like, share, and subscribe, and all that, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. Do you have anything you want to plug before you're doing? Yeah, you're still doing Terranigma, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Nice.
and it's a great game, but play Expedition 33.
Wow.
That's how good that game is. It's very, very quickly becoming like possibly my favorite game of all time. I haven't completely finished it yet. I'm very close, I think, but I can't talk it up enough. I just love it to death. It's so good.
So
that's saying something, man.
it is very good. Search Resonant Arc or the State of the Arc podcast, and that's where you'll find us.
Nice. And I'll put links to that in the description box below. All right, guys, that'll do it.
Man.
Until my next video, I want to remind you guys, as always, and as per usual, stay yellow.